Tech Art Ted, 29 August, Part 2 Electric Boogaloo. How's it going, folks? On my way to work. What a interesting day it's been. After all my bluster and blow about how there's no Ukrainian offensive in Kherson region, we have a offensive by the Ukrainian military in Kherson. Or is it a joke? Is it a joke? Honestly, folks, is this a real offensive or is it a joke? Because I will tell you what, if what we got today was it's bad for Ukraine. Absolutely bad for Ukraine. Now, if you have a look on what's going on the bullshit net, better known as Telegram, you will find a lot of interesting things. Very, very early this morning, when the offensive was announced in certain Ukrainian circles, it came out that this was personally ordered by President Zelensky. Yes, President Zelensky. He decided that he had to have this offensive. And that's not a very good look, because Hitler used to like to personally put together offenses. And yes, I'm scratching my nose. And these offenses, a lot of times that Hitler personally ordered or delayed or interfered in, usually met in utter defeat. So here we are, Zelensky, because you can't have a Z in Ukraine. That's why we call him Zelensky. This is why things are looking bad. The Ukrainians attacked in the Kherson region on 3 axes of attack. To make a long story short, 2 of the lines failed miserably with heavy losses, including 2 I think it was 25 aircraft, several rotary winged assets, and a piss pot full of armored vehicles. The 3rd apparently has made better ground, but has stalled out and is quickly being reduced. I would say that all 3 are failed, but we need to see what tomorrow brings. Because I'll be quite honest, folks, if this was the Great Kherson Offensive and they couldn't keep up the pressure for 24 hours, then Ukraine's done. At least in that region they are. Because let's face it, you don't plan on an offensive for modern combat, especially not in Europe, and have an offensive that peters out in less than 24 hours unless you are broken. Your military is broken. You have no hope. You have no hope of victory. And we'll have to seek them tomorrow. Now, this may have just been a feint. It may have been a joke. It may have just meant, hey, we got to do something, because if we don't do nothing, the tap on the weapons is going to dry up. And that might be what Zelensky and his regime in Kiev are thinking. But you don't throw everything away. And this is how good it apparently went for the Ukrainians. If you are to believe what I saw on a Ukrainian Telegram channel this morning, was that there was a desperate plea for doctors, any doctor in the region, any doctor, to please report to Nikolaev, because apparently lots and lots and lots of Ukrainian wounded soldiers are being poured into Nikolaev, the only major city in the area, and that seems to be where they're collecting all of their wounded. That's not a good look, folks. Logistics, once again, logistics. How do you win a war? Logistics. You need to think logistics if you're going to win a war. Well, apparently, the Ukrainians didn't think enough about logistics to have ample field hospitals in place for their personnel. There seems to be this huge reoccurring theme that the Ukrainians just don't seem to care about their people. Now, they always say that the Russians don't. Oh, the Russians don't care about their people. And we're seeing that time and time again that it's the Ukrainians who don't care for their people. They're leaving their troops that are dead on the battlefield to be eaten by whatever wildlife's around. They refuse to collect their wounded. They refuse to collect they're dead, and they just abandon it and run away. There was a video I shared this morning that I believe was near Kadima, where there was an ambush or booby trap that went off. 2 Ukrainian soldiers going down a path. One steps off, he gets blown up, and the other troop just goes on like there's no tomorrow, like there's nothing happening, like there's not anything that bothers him about his comrade getting blown up. That's not at all what I expect from soldiers. This is not all. You don't leave your buddy behind. Hell, the Russians have it on their hats. We don't leave our own behind. We don't leave our own behind. We don't leave our own. We take care of our own. That seems to be a Russian reoccurring theme through the war too, at least in their propaganda. And it seems to stand in stark contrast to the Ukrainian every man for himself deal. So, interesting thing is the Ukrainians said, oh, well, hey, the Russians aren't in Kadima. They're nowhere near Kadima. And apparently Wagner Group made a video. I've posted it on my Facebook, where not only are they making a sign they're in Kadima, one of the troops pulls out his phone with Google Earth and shows his position is in Kadima. So Kadima, which is now going to be part of the greater encirclement of Artemovsk, or Bakhmut as the Ukrainians call it, that's a huge thorn. Now we are no longer looking at being able to envelop Bakhmut on 2 sides. We're now actually 3 sides of enveloping Bakhmut. Bakhmut is going to enter operational encirclement very soon, if not already. And operational encirclement, how is operational encirclement different than physical encirclement? In the U.S. Army, we always talked about a physical encirclement. You physically encircled. You had troops all the way around. Operational encirclement is a lot different. Operational encirclement means that you have fire control over the areas you don't have troops in. In other words, I only need to hold so much of the perimeter around the town. If I can throw artillery on the roads and everything else, I don't need to control that. I can let the artillery do the work. And it's been really an eye-opener for me watching this war, because it's easy to go back and read about the history of World War II. It's easy to look at these things. Sometimes it's harder to understand them. And watching the war as it's progressing in Ukraine right now, I'm getting to see a lot of these things happen in real time. I'm getting to see the great mythological artillery army that the Soviets supposedly were. I'm seeing it played out on the battlefield, and just how much of an artillery war is going on in that region. And it's interesting, folks. It really is interesting. It is simply just blow the living shit out of everything, weaken them up, and move in. And I know that's oversimplifying it, because the Russians are being bean counters like I never imagined. They're doing the same sort of thing that we do in wartime. Their intelligence are sitting there. They've got all the units drawn out before them, and they figure out who the units are, and they figure out what their TO&E calls for and what their estimated strength was, and then they attrit them. They figure out how much attrition has been carried out on these units, how they are losing equipment, how they're losing personnel, and they know when a unit is down to its last leg, and if they're holding a vital sector of the field, the Russians will mortar them one more time or artillery them one more time, and then they move in and take what they want. And it is the same thing they were doing in Syria, for those of you who weren't watching what was going on in Syria. And it's interesting to me because apparently the Russian military is a lot more professional and a lot more intelligence-based than anybody in the West was willing to admit. And I still don't know that they're willing to admit. It's got a lot of people's eyes open, the ones who aren't bootlicks at the Pentagon, the guys who actually want to see this country survive, which I want to see my country survive. Don't know about you, but I would be very concerned right now because we've got a bunch of politicians that act like they can glad hand and slap people around, and these people aren't the same people they were 20, 30 years ago. They don't have the same attitude, they don't have the same military, and after being glad-handed and slapped around for 20, 30 years, they tend to be a little pissy. And I think we need to watch our steps in the way we act. Look, I don't want to see a war with anyone. I don't. I'm very pro-military. I believe that you keep the military in a quarter, you feed it raw meat, and when the time comes and there's no other possibility, you unleash the dogs of war. You allow the military to go forth and destroy your enemies in a grotesque military fashion and kill a lot of people and destroy their infrastructure and destroy everything they have. And you make it so painful for them that they quit. Unfortunately, we don't do that. And with today's woke military, it's getting worse. Absolutely getting worse. Nobody wants to join the military and have to go through rape prevention classes and classes on helping everybody understand their pronouns and get in touch with the reality. That's not what the military's for. And if you want to take and piss a lot of people off and have your military become a ghost town, then that's what you're going to get. And I think it's really sad that a lot of these leftists don't understand it. They think they can go into the military, which the military is a refuge for a lot of conservatives. A lot of young conservatives are in the military. And they think they can go in and change everything. What they don't understand is, no, the young conservatives, the young patriots, they're going to quit joining the military. And then you're not going to be able to make your numbers. The numbers, the almighty numbers. You won't be able to say, hey, I can't get enough troops. I don't have enough to form a division. What's going on here? And there's an answer for that, folks, and it's an answer that you leftists who are pushing the agenda to make the military work, it's an answer you're not going to like. It is called the selective service. It is called the draft. And unfortunately, you and your woke nonsense are going to be called up, put in a uniform, and forced to serve. And if not, you'll go to jail. And that's going to be the rub with this. You're going to it's the way things always go. Somebody gets too full of themselves and push things too far. And now you're getting to where nobody wants to join the military, and we've got a government who's insistent upon thinking they can smack the world around, that they can piss off Russia, they can piss off China, they can piss off anyone they want, and that you'll just sit there and listen to us because we're America, when we got no military to back it up with, and our military is shrinking. You know, let's face what we've done to the military in the last 3 years. We've kicked a bunch of people out of the military for not getting COVID vaccinations. We've kicked a shitload of National Guard out because the guy said, fuck you, I'm not getting the jab. And we've lost Army troops, we've lost Marines, we've lost Air Force, we've lost Navy because people refused to get the vaccination. And it's really great because we're finding out those vaccinations haven't really helped. They haven't really done anything. They haven't kept people from getting COVID. And so we basically lost a large number of our personnel for what? For what? So you feel better? So you feel better. Okay. And the guy who kicked him out is the same guy that's trying to press Putin's buttons right now. And that's not going so well. It's not going so well for Europe. It's not going so well for us. And it's about to get worse. I've said it before, winter is coming. What's going to happen during winter? Well, Europe's going to freeze, and the Ukrainian military has no choice but to retreat into the cities. No air cover. There'll be no cover in the forest. Right now, it's interesting, and it hadn't dawned on me until the last 2 weeks, that with the Russians going in infantry light, in other words, not light infantry, but infantry light, just not as many infantry troops, they're very dependent upon their heavy weapons. They're very dependent on their armor. They're very dependent upon their artillery. They're very dependent on those things. But what can defeat that advantage? Well, the forest. And there is a forest region up near Izium, the so-called Izium bridgehead, that the Russians are avoiding this area, and they're trying to operationally encircle it because they don't want to go in. And once the leaves come off the trees, all your little drones, all your little spies in the air are going to find the Ukrainian positions, and then they're going to call in artillery on those positions and destroy those folks in great detail. Or the Ukrainians are going to have to leave the area, and they're going to have to take refuge in and amongst the population centers, which they already have shown a willingness to do, which will up the number of civilian casualties. Although some of the civilians have attempted to fight back against the military and have not been real happy with the fact that the Ukrainian military decided to make targets out of their neighborhoods. And we'll see if that gains any ground. We'll see if the Ukrainians are able to put a stop to that nonsense. I think it's really funny. We think that we're going to turn the Russians against Putin, who's enjoying over 80% popularity, higher popularity than what he had before the war. And yet, Zelensky is not very popular anymore. And a lot of people have had it with Zelensky and his troops inside Ukraine. In fact, it's interesting, the Ukrainians who refuse to go home and fight, the Ukrainians that are occupying Europe and the United States and other countries, but refuse to go home and fight, Zelensky's really popular with them, but not popular enough for them to go home and defend their homeland. So when you meet a Ukrainian who wants to give you shit, and he's a male of fighting age, you might ask him, well, if Ukraine is so great, what are you doing here? If Ukraine is worth defending so much, and you think I ought to spend my children's future for weapons for that country, then perhaps you might want to go there and defend your homeland. Well, just a thought. But, as I said, the military summary channel, Dima, who's out of Belarus, good guy, fairly down the middle, and Dima says we'll see what brings tomorrow, because we got two answers tomorrow. Either the offensive will be renewed, and that means that they were prepared for an offensive and they do have lasting combat ability, combat power, or the offensive won't be renewed. And if the offensive is not renewed, there are two possibilities. Number one, it was a joke, a feint, it was bullshit. Or it wasn't bullshit and the Ukrainians are spent. They are done. And no amount of lies in the Washington Post, no amount of lies from Reuters, the Telegraph, or the BBC are able to hide it anymore. So we're going to have to figure these things out, folks. And tomorrow, come daylight, we'll know. I half expect the one leg that has had the minor gains, I look for those guys to retreat during the night. Because the other two legs of the attack have pulled back, suffering heavy casualties. And that means there's only one aggressive force right now to be dealt with. And I look for the Russians to swat it pretty handily. And if I was a Ukrainian soldier, and of course they don't tell you on the lines that the other two legs have failed, but if they were to find that out, I think they would be pretty inclined to say, hey, let's get the hell out of here before they bring a world of hurt on us. I think probably one of the more interesting things about this war is cell phones. The cell phones have gotten people shot for showing off on their cell phones, for posting on Telegram. They've got mercenaries blew up in Lviv, however you want to say it. They've got Russians killed because of pictures that they were able to triangulate. The Ukrainians were able to triangulate and find out where they were. And let's face it, they've got people shot because you get captured and you've got pictures of your swastikas and some of the bad things that you may have done to some people who fell into your hands. The people whose hands you fell into probably don't feel too generous about extending you any more convenience than what you extended their comrades. And the information that comes in and out and up and down and back and forth, guys at the front who get their phones charged, they can be on Telegram. They can see the same stuff I'm seeing. And they can see it in their own language. They can read it. They can see it. And to be honest, most places in Ukraine have as good a cell service as I have out in the middle of nowhere. So it's interesting for me, this impact that cell phones and that sort of information through the internet is having on this conflict. And speaking of which, there was a video that's appeared of what is supposed to be a Russian soldier talking about how terrible the Ukrainian fire coming in on his position is, and the guy won't show his face. He shows a bloody mark and he won't put it to where you can actually see his face, and he's talking, and I hate to tell you folks, he won't show his face. I wonder why. And he's speaking Russian. Half of Ukraine speaks Russian. You won't show your face. It's not a good video. There's no way to authenticate it. I wonder why. I just wonder why. I mean, I would be really surprised at this point if it was true. And that's simply because the Ukrainians have went out of their way to lie since day one in this conflict. They have made the Ghost of Kiev a national celebrity, somebody who never existed. The martyrs of Snake Island that are still alive and actually been decorated by the Ukrainian government. All these lies, all these falsehoods, and somehow we are still needing to go on and watch shit and pretend. And that brings us to the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant that the Atomic Energy Regulatory Body is supposed to be. Well, those folks are already off to a very shaky start. They released a statement saying that they really wanted to work because Zaporozhye is Ukraine's largest nuclear power plant. No, it isn't. Ukraine doesn't own it anymore. It's no longer in Ukrainian hands. Sorry to break that to you guys. It's no longer a Ukrainian nuclear power plant. And they're planning to get to the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant through Ukrainian territory. Not sure how you go about that. The plant is actually in Russian-controlled territory. So sooner or later, you are going to have to cross into Russian-controlled territory. Now, the Russians have said that they will grant access, that they will help take care of these folks. But who's causing the problems here? The Russians have the plant. It's their plant. They have taken control of it. And the plant's getting shelled. Artillery rockets, including U.S.-made HIMARS, has fell upon the plant. Who has all that? Who would want to shell an area that's full of Russians? Would it be Russia or would it be Ukraine? I think it's pretty easy to see what's going on here, but Zelensky keeps trying to push this idea that the Russians are selling their own nuclear power plant and somehow they are going to be responsible for a great catastrophe. But that ain't how that works. You blow up the plant, it spreads radiation everywhere. That's on your ass. And it's on the U.S.'s ass for supplying him and continue to supply him after he shows that he's willing to do that. And I think a lot of you people who've been elected to Congress, who keep signing off on these bills to keep giving Zelensky and his fat cats in Ukraine all this money and weapons, I think you guys should be held accountable. I think there needs to be an investigation into what's going on here. because you guys definitely aren't looking out for the security of the world. You're just basically redistributing wealth. Even if you're a conservative, that's all you're doing. You're taking money from the Americans and you're giving it to Ukrainian oligarchs and Ukrainian thugs who are selling shit on the dark web. But there we are, one more in the books. I'll talk to you folks later. Bye.